Hey guys, welcome to the show. I'm Tejera, your host, and this is Industry Standard. My guest today is Alison Roman. She's a best-selling author, food writer, and internet icon who's defined a generation of cooking. You probably know her chickpea stew, her shallot pasta, or her famous chocolate chip cookies. Her new cookbook, Something from Nothing, is all about how to make food feel abundant even when you're working with less. Stay tuned, and thanks for watching. Thank you so much for joining Industry Standard. I'm so excited to speak with you, and I'm such a fan. I'm so excited to talk about your new cookbook.
Thank you. I'm excited to also talk about my new cookbook.
Yeah, I'm Spanish and I eat a lot of tortilla, and I used to eat my grandmother's tortilla growing up, and I noticed that you have a tortilla recipe in your new cookbook. And that got me so excited. My grandma used to say growing up, there's two kinds of people. There are people who make their tortilla runny, and there's people who don't have a clue about life. And I always thought that was so funny. But I love that you have a tortilla recipe, and you have this quote in your cookbook that's tortillas aren't meant to be perfect, they're just meant to be yours. And I love that. I love that you champion this sort of like imperfection in your recipes. How do you think something from nothing builds on that philosophy of like making something yours, this sort of like unfussiness to yourself?
Yeah, I think like honestly what you just said about your grandma saying that about her tortilla really sums it up, because so much about cooking specifically feels like, especially in like media and a world of like sound bites and people having opinions and takes, it's sort of like, well, this is the way to do it and this is the way to do it. And I just don't really believe in that. I think that, this is the way that I do it. And I think that is information for everybody. And I take that in the way that I view everything in life. If I see a movie, I'm like, oh, well, this is how this person directs or this person acts. Or I see a concert, I'm like, well, this is how this person sings or plays an instrument. In the same way that when I write a recipe or I cook or season food, like this is how I cook and how I season food and how I like my things. It's not declarative, right? It's not this is the ultimate or the best or the only. And food is so deeply personal. And I think that for whatever reason, there's been this like emphasis on perfection. And I don't know if it's like chef culture or fine dining, restaurant culture or whatever, but there was this sort of shift in precision and perfection, and especially like visually with our food. And I think that most of us would agree that like the best tasting food we've ever had is sometimes not the most beautiful, or it's like a little messy, or it's something that didn't turn out the way we thought it would, or it was at somebody's house, or it was by somebody who certainly was not a professional chef. And I think that reminding yourself of that and giving yourself permission to feel that way. And just because you're not a professional doesn't mean that you can't also be like, oh, it's like not perfectly round, but it's pretty good, or okay, the edges are a little brown, but that's fine. And I think that the most confident of cooks, and I would call myself a pretty confident cook, doesn't really sweat that. If I make a tortilla and the edges are a little dark, that's fine. It's probably pretty good anyway. Like I don't consider that an indictment on my skill level, or, it's not a declaration of this is how a tortilla should be. It's sort of, this is how it turned out right now. And cooking is so, it ebbs, it flows. What kind of day are you having? How big were the eggs? Did you look away while the onions were cooking? Like, I don't know. It's a moving, living, breathing act that we participate in. And to sort of treat it so rigidly and structured, like it should always be the same every time, is so wild to me. And it's just like not what I believe in.
Was there a specific moment or a recipe that inspired the philosophy behind this book? Or was it sort of a collection of moments that you were like, this is starting to feel like it should be a collection?
Yeah, I think it was more a sort of like collection over time. I think I started to see a pattern in my own food and my own cooking and my preferences, and looking at the food that I was making and gravitating towards and the style of cooking that I was doing, I was like, well, what's the unifying theme? Because I'm not a person that likes to make things without reason. Like I don't just like I could cook anything, right? I could cook with any ingredients. I could cook multiple styles of food, but I don't. I'm like I cook what I like and I cook what I want to eat. Um, and it all fits together. Like I feel like if I made you dinner every night for the next 6 weeks, you would always feel like you're at the same restaurant. And I feel like the same goes for my cookbooks. And so I had to really ask myself, like, well, what is the unifying element? What is the unifying theme? And I think just for a lot of reasons at that time when I was considering the theme of my next book, it felt like it was the time to do pantry.
Yeah, I love that. Do you think, we're sort of in an era of like, food trends and micro trends and everyone watching these like food influencers on TikTok. And I'm wondering if you think people are craving, something more unfussy and pared back, sort of like a more no frills type of cooking now because we're so overwhelmed with content. Do you think, like why? Because I think it's a departure from my grandmother's generation, for example, where cooking had to be so precise and so perfect.
Yeah, I don't know what people want in that world. I think it's just more like not divided. Divided to me sort of indicates like something negative, but like it's just more diverse, I guess. Like there's really something for everyone, and I think that some people might find themselves fatigued, and others might look at my book and be like, "Oh my God, this is so boring." Like chickpeas cooked with olive oil and oregano and chili for 7 hours, like boring. But like I eat that and I'm like, wow, this is transcendent. This is so much better than it ought to be. And understanding that there is like a real pleasure in simplicity when things are done well is to me like where I'm at with cooking. And, I'm not suggesting you open up a can of chickpeas and eat one and call that a recipe because those don't taste very good. But you do, like understanding that it doesn't take very much to make food taste really good, I think is to me something that comes with age. And after having worked in fine dining restaurants, having cooked really complicated food, having access to all the ingredients in the world and all the time in the world and people that work for you and do the prep and do the dishes and you have all the resources available. And at the end of the day, you're like, well, when it's just me and I'm doing the shopping and I'm buying the ingredients, what do I want to make when I'm actually eating with my friends or cooking for my family? And it tends to be like the more simple, pared down, like cozy versions of food. And so I don't know what like quote unquote people want. I think that most people probably go through phases where they're like, oh, just get me like a piece of toast, just like what I wouldn't do, like, but honestly, like a really good piece of bread toasted, just perfectly toasted with really good salted butter and like crunchy salt and pepper on top is such a good food. And that's not boring to me. That's like, that's wonderful, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And what I really like too with your cookbooks is that there's no discrepancy between what it looks like in the cookbook and then when I try to make it, it actually looks like the picture, And I wonder, was that intentional? Were you like trying to make it seem real, like authentic?
Yeah, I mean it is. It is real. It is authentic. That's been the case with all my books. I make all the food. And then we photograph it. That's like been important to me since day one. I feel like having worked in the editorial world where each dish was so fussed over with like food stylists, and there was like a food stylist and two assistants and a photographer and their assistant and the prop stylist and their assistant. And like it took 17 people to make one image. And I was just like, what if it was me, maybe one assistant and a photographer, and like fewer people and the food is real and then we eat it afterwards or eat it for lunch or whatever. Like, obviously, you're using a plate maybe you don't always eat off of or whatever. You are making a book because you're creating so many images in a short period of time. You do have to get creative. But at the end of the day, like I'm basically following my own recipe and then taking a photograph of what I make. But I don't think that a person feels encouraged to continue cooking from a book if they don't have success with it. And I think part of that success is looking at the book and then looking at your food and looking at the book and looking at your food and being like, oh, I did it. Because if it doesn't match, you're going to somehow feel like you didn't do it properly.
Yeah, absolutely. And something that you're famous for as well is your writing style, which feels everyone always comments on the writing, it feels so personal, it feels so distinct, it feels familiar. And I think a lot of people, probably more people than you even realize, have this sort of like parasocial relationship with you via your writing. I mean, I wonder, because I mean, personally, I've cooked through so many of your cookbooks with my partner, and we make your recipes almost on a daily basis. And I think what really stands out is, you know, the quality of your writing. It feels like you're kind of in the room with us, which is crazy to think. Do you ever consider that element of like that parasocial element when you're writing, or does that you try to like put that out of your mind?
I sort of like, as cheesy as it sounds, like I literally still like pretend like I'm writing to like 10 people. It's very difficult for me to imagine that I'm writing to more than that, because then I think you really start to try to please everyone and you can't. And so you kind of imagine that you're writing to 10 people who really like you. And otherwise, if you're like, well, okay, I'm writing to 10 people who really like me, 5 people who kind of like me, and 3 people who hate me. And then you're going to start to like, you know, soften your voice, change your opinions, make adjust. I don't know. You're just going to start to change who you are to try and make everyone happy. And then no one's happy. And I don't know. I think that then you're not really being yourself. And then the 10 people who liked you for being yourself aren't going to like you at all. So I think it's sort of like at this point in my life, I've fully realized that I'd rather have the people, I'd rather present 100% who I am and be 100% who I am. And people can like or not like it. But I know that if they don't like it, they're at least not liking me for who I am. Because I think that oftentimes in life, and I feel like we've all done this at like a party or a work function or whatever, we like put on a face or pretend to do something we don't want to do, or we act like a person we don't want to act like, and the result isn't what we want. And we're like, wait, that felt gross. Like I sort of faked it. I wasn't honest with myself, and this person didn't like me back, or like I didn't get what I wanted, and like this was a mess. You know, like in the future, it's not worth it to me to sacrifice like not being yourself. I fully believe that I feel better about going into a situation and like liking who I am, presenting myself authentically, proud of the work that I'm doing. And if somebody still is like, she's not for me, I'm like, that is totally fine. I feel so good about that, because we all know when we're doing it. We all know when we're like being a version of ourselves that like isn't our most authentic self. And someone's like, yeah, I don't really like that. And you're like, fuck, I don't like that either. You know, like that doesn't feel good. So I would just rather, if someone's not going to like it, I'd rather them not like it and then I can live with that. But to me, writing is the most, you know, the most concentrated, distilled version of me. And it's the most intimate and the most personal. And so I think that I understand that parasocial relationship, because I have that with people. I have that with people that I read, you know, where I'm like, oh, they're talking to me. And I think that is, you know, I don't know how those people write. If maybe they're like, yeah, I write to 10 people as well, or 5 people, or 1 person. But I think as soon as you try to start to write for everyone that you think you're writing for, it kind of goes off the rails.
Yeah, and I think everyone has such a strong opinion too, whether you do your bread this way or whether you cook your eggs this way. Everyone, it's so incredibly subjective that it's really hard to please everyone. And I think you do best when you just do it the way you like, and then
Totally.
people will like it.
It's not just hard, it's impossible. And like, you know, and again, like I think that's totally fine. Like I've worked with a lot of different people in my life, and you know, sometimes I want to work with somebody and I say like, you know, let's say they're a photographer, and I say like, I really love your work. Here's what I'm trying to do. Here's the mood board. And I've had sometimes a photographer be like, you know what, that's like kind of not the work that I do. And I'm like, awesome. Let's work together on another project. Like, this is not the work you do. I don't want you to do something that you don't do. We won't be happy with each other as collaborators. Like, this is, you know what I mean? And it's like, that doesn't make it wrong or bad. Like, great. But that's not always the relationship you have with people, you know, on the internet. You don't get to like decide who's consuming your work. But all to say that if I'm like, this is my recipe for X, Y, and Z, someone might be like, oh, that's not for me. And that's okay. That doesn't mean they don't like me or my food. And they just be like, oh, I don't like my sauce spicy, or I don't like salmon, or, you know what I mean? I don't know.
Yes, I do. Yes. Do you think so you had a son this year, Charlie?
I did, yeah, Charlie.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Do you think that motherhood influenced your way of writing at all? Has it, or your way of cooking?
Um, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's impossible for it to not influence pretty much everything in life. Um, I think with regards to writing and cooking, I've just had less time to do both. And so with writing, it feels like, honestly, I feel like I've only really gotten back into writing in like the last 2 months. I'm like 9 months postpartum. So it takes a long time. It really does like a number on you physically and emotionally and mentally. And it's so different for every person. Some people bounce back right away. Some people, it takes them 3 years. Some people come in and out. Like it's really, not to use the word journey, but it is a real journey. But it was very hard to consider writing or cooking for a really long time after he was born. And because he wasn't eating food, like other than milk or formula, I didn't necessarily feel the need to cook because I was so focused on taking care of him that I wasn't even like really taking care of myself or my husband. And so the food that I was cooking tended to be like very basic, not creative. Like I wasn't working, and I'm kind of always working. Like in a past life, every time I cooked, it was sort of with the intention of possibly publishing a recipe. I almost rarely cooked with just for sustenance. It was always like this could be something I could publish one day. And basically from the time he was born until I'd say like a few months ago, I didn't almost nothing I cooked would I consider something I would want to publish or could because I would just was like I my brain wasn't even thinking about it.
Yeah, and I mean, as someone, you really been hustling since you were like pretty young. It must have been crazy to now suddenly have this human who just depends on you, and you are like, what? And I'm supposed to work too. Like it's so much
Yeah.
for anyone.
It felt kind of like a break. And like a lot of people will be like maternity leave is not a vacation, and I know that it's not because it's really not. But in a weird way I kind of felt like it was because it was the first time in my life that I wasn't working for longer than like a month. And I didn't even really, I took like 6 weeks off and then I had to go back to finishing the cookbook. But then I did take like 2 months off. And it was the longest period of time I've ever gone without working.
Wow. In August, you wrote this beautiful passage for Charlie about eating blueberries and how you eat the skin and then you would feed him the blueberries and he sort of like nibble on that. And it really made me think about the relationship between like motherhood and being a nurturer, but also writing food recipes for people and really being sort of like quote unquote like in the kitchen with people. And I don't want to like reduce it to, I don't want to like overly gender it because but I do think there's like a feminine element to that of being a mother and being a nurturer and also being a chef. Do does that ever cross your mind of like, oh, I'm a mother now, but I'm also sort of like mothering, not in like a weird way, but you're like mothering loads of people sort of.
Yeah, mother is mothering, it's been said. Yeah, I do. And, I've always thought it was so interesting that being a chef has been in America and in most of like Western Europe, being a chef has been predominantly a male industry. And in most of the world who does the cooking in the home, it's the woman. And again, I'm using like very traditional gender roles here, but like, I just find that so funny because it's so clearly to me like, yeah, I do feel like a woman is a provider and a caretaker, like in a traditional sense. And that really translates to me to cooking. And cooking is care, cooking is nurture, cooking is like caregiving. And so it's so funny that along the way it became like, well, chefs are men. And you're like, well, that's funny because it feels like actually chefs are women. And I'm talking like in like the 1800s, but yeah, I don't know. I do think that I hadn't really ever considered myself a maternal person. Like if you had asked me like 5 years ago, 6 years ago, are you a maternal person? I would say no. I would say that like kind of my whole life I had been like looking for other people to take care of me, but maybe in that experience had like maybe started to take care of other people, but like, yeah, I don't know. It is coming very naturally to me in a way that I'm very relieved by. Um, but yeah, it is such like a beautiful thing to think about food in that way for the first time in a way that I hadn't really before. Where like I just roasted squash today and I like peeled it, I cut it up, I salt and pepper and olive oil and I roasted it at 425 for like 25 minutes. It got really tender. And I did that instead of normally I've been like boiling and steaming, but I was like, oh, Charlie really likes sweet foods. And I thought, oh my God, that's so sweet. I know what he likes. And I'm like catering, like this was like the first time I was making something for him. And instead of just being like, well, he needs like his cauliflower and kale puree with the lentils and then this and then that. But I was like, oh, I'm making him a little treat. I'm instead of steaming the squash, which will still be sweet, I'm roasting it because it'll bring out the natural sugars of the squash and he'll really enjoy that. You know, he's 9 months old. I don't know if he's going to have a preference, but I thought how exciting for the first time in his life, he's going to have roasted squash today. What a
Yeah.
treat. And he's going to love it. I know he is, but it's a small task that is going to make me feel really good. It's going to make him feel really good. I don't know, it's something that I never did before. Cooking was like such a elaborate act. You know, I was like making dinner for friends. I was making recipes to publish to like thousands of people. It was like an act for other people that I never met, or it was like a very personal thing that I did for my friends or family or my husband. And now it's like even more intimate than that. I'm like making it for this little person who can't do anything themselves and who's I completely at my mercy of what he eats. Like he doesn't know what squash is. He doesn't know what's about to happen today, you know, but I don't know. It's really very special.
Does he have a sense of taste yet? Like, does he like, I know like my godson really likes avocados, but then my other one like hates avocados.
He hates them unless I
He
put
hates avocados.
a ton of lime and salt or lemon and salt on them. He's just not that into them. But you know what? I'm not either because I don't think they taste like anything.
You know, fair enough. He takes after his mom.
He needs the food to be seasoned. I've noticed that. He's like, the first time I made him a puree, like when he was just learning how to eat solids, I made something, I forget what it was, but it didn't taste very good. And he didn't like it. And I was like, well, of course he doesn't like it. This doesn't taste like anything. Why did I do this? You know, and now like the food I make, I kind of season it more like I would for an adult with like a little less salt and it tastes really good. And I, you know, make like chicken stock with leftover chicken from a rotisserie chicken or a chicken that I've roasted. Or like if I make a steak, I'll save the bones and make like a little beef broth and cook some cauliflower in that with lentils and kale and puree it. And he really likes, like, he's like, yeah, this tastes good. Cause I'm eating it. And I'm like, this does taste really good.
Yeah. Um, I wanted to ask you a little bit about First Bloom, about your grocery store. How did you decide, first of all, when did you find the time? But second of all, how did you decide to like embark on that project? And yeah, how do you decide what to stock on the shelves?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know where I found the time. I think I don't, I don't do anything alone. There's like several people that I work with on several projects. Like with First Bloom, I have this wonderful woman, Danielle, who's an interior designer, and she really helped me design. Like she designed it. I was like, here's what I like. And she's like, here's how it should work. Like, I was like, okay, I know it's going to look great. Right. I know she's going to like help me with that. And then I have a friend, Lauren, who's opened a store before in a past life. And I was like, okay, Lauren can help me figure out like how to set up an account with these purveyors. And like, that's a start there. And then I thought, okay, then I can call this person. Like there's a lot of people in my life that I can call upon for advice, that are smart and good at what they do. And I can't do anything that I do without them. And so I should just say that I'm not like working in a vacuum, but I think that everything takes so long to do that I kind of always just like to have a few projects going. Because I'm like, you know what, nothing's going to happen overnight. And wouldn't it be cool to have a grocery store one day? And so you kind of start working on it. And then one day you have one. You know, it doesn't happen overnight. Then these things do take time. And in regards to like, how do you decide what to stock on the shelf? I literally, at the time I had an assistant and I had her go through all of my cookbooks and list every ingredient that I had mentioned in these cookbooks make a spreadsheet. And then I went through that list and made sure that we had everything on those lists. And because to me, when I'm making my cookbooks, I'm making sure that I'm not calling for anything that people can't find easily. And just to like jog my memory, I was like, okay, well, these are basics and these are things that I cook with and like and use. And then I, did some editing and then I added a bunch of stuff. Then I took away some stuff. But like, we don't carry barbecue chips because I hate them. We carry Pocky because I love it. We carry candles because they're locally made and they smell great. We carry a ton of like beautiful produce because it's locally grown and we want to support farmers. We carry beautiful eggs and dairy and meats and chicken and lamb, all from nearby farms. Because again, like if you're going to have a store in a place like the Catskills, you can only do that if you are supporting the places in the area. So some of the decisions are like made for you in that way, right? Like, okay, well, we're going to get the eggs from this place and the chicken from this place. And then from there, you're like, okay, well, what are the best anchovies? And then you're like, okay, well, I want a expensive anchovy and I want a cheap anchovy. And then from there, it's like you have the same conversation with other ingredients that feel important. The things that are important to me, I have a lot of. Like there's like a lot of mustards, pickles, olives, anchovies, pastas, beans. Yeah.
Of course. How do you decide like the quality and price point of the items? Like you mentioned you have like something that's really good and maybe like the fancy version and maybe something that's like more affordable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean there's standard like retail markup, which is anywhere from 40 to 60%. It's difficult to own and operate a retail establishment with those margins, as you know, because I mean, I didn't know actually. So I was like, oh, 40 to 60%, that's like pretty good margin because for everything you buy, you make 50% more money and then you're rich or whatever. Not rich, but like, you're like, oh, that makes sense. But then, okay, well, what about labor and the cost of shipping or the cost of goods or the cost of like the paper bag that you put the thing in? It's like everything adds up and your margins then become, in the 20% range. Some of the items, and this is a decision that I have made as a business owner, and I'm in this position to do this because I A, own the building and I B, don't take a salary from the job, the quote unquote job from this. I don't take a salary from the store as the business owner. But there are some items that we carry that are local, like our coffee is roasted nearby, our eggs are local, a lot of our meats, some of our produce, they're expensive. They're really expensive for us to buy even at a wholesale price. And that is because for those really small producers to roast the coffee, to farm the eggs, to grow the vegetables, to raise the chickens, costs them a lot of money because they're not large farms. They're not subsidized by government funds. They're not at scale in such a way that it makes sense for them to be competitive with these larger farmers or producers. So then it's up to us as a small business to champion them and say, well, that means a lot to us. And instead of saying, okay, well, it's more important that I become whole and then charge you $12 for a dozen eggs, I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to barely break even on this dozen of eggs. But that means then that bag of beans might be like $1 or $2 more than it would be elsewhere.
Yeah. Have you ever considered opening up like a chain or like another location in New York City?
I mean, I don't know if that plan works in New York City because I really, knowing what I know now about running a business, like a grocery store in a place where I, A, again, own the building and B, don't pay myself. Although at this point I'm not doing much labor. So like in like the day-to-day aspect, I don't know how anybody survives. Like how much money we would have to be, how much more, we would be doing more business exponentially likely if we were in the city because there'd be more people, more foot traffic, we'd have a bigger space, but we'd also be paying $15,000 to $20,000 a month in rent, depending on the location. It's unbelievable what small businesses have to endure to open up and survive in New York or Brooklyn. It's really incredible. And I hats off to anybody who manages to do it and do it well and successfully. And it's very difficult, especially with regards to food, because, people really expect food to be cheap. They expect ingredients to be cheap. They expect restaurants to be cheap. They expect it all to be cheap. And it's not. And especially again, like if you want like the good chicken and the nice eggs that are this fantasy version of like a person hand collecting the egg from a chicken that's running around in the sunshine, well, that's going to cost you because that can't happen in like a factory farm setting.
Yeah, that
That
makes
was like a real
sense.
TED talk. I feel like I went off on a real tangent. I've been thinking a lot about it lately because I feel really strongly about it. And I think that it's difficult to properly come across like how that economic structure works within like the farm to retail to restaurant to whatever establishment. And it's like, I struggle with that as well, even as like a, recipe writer where I want you to, when you're shopping, I want to encourage you to buy like the good chicken from the farmer at the farmer's market. But that for a 4 pound chicken could cost you like $35. Maybe you don't want to spend that. Maybe you're like, what if I have $12 to spend on a chicken? And I don't want to like shame any, like, I don't want to say like, ew, that's gross, or you shouldn't do that. I'd rather you cook the chicken and I'd rather you feel proud for cooking for yourself. And so even if that chicken comes from a place that I can't in good conscience support. So I'm sort of faced with do I support somebody, like, do I champion the sort of economic struggle? Do I champion the farmer struggle? People think of like expensive food as being very elitist. I also consider it to be very like pro worker and like pro fair wage. And so I don't know, it's very complicated.
Yeah, I guess it's like who do you want to support in this equation? Is it the person who's selling the chicken? Is it the person who's growing the produce? Is it it's so hard going back to what we were saying earlier, like it's so hard all the time to think of everything, and I think at some point you do have to think, who am I advocating for? Who am I supporting? What are my principles? What are my tastes? And just sort of like pick something and stick to that and be like truthful and authentic in that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know it's like, yeah. I mean, and again, I think wherever I can, and sometimes we don't have the option, but wherever I can, I do like to give people options. So like we have like the $3 Cento anchovies and we have the $8 Cantabrian anchovies. I think they're both great. They serve different purposes to me. You should be able to decide for yourself, and like the good pasta, the Diceco pasta, both are awesome. I cook with both. One costs $12, one costs $4. Make your own choices. And I want to provide you with both because there's not a wrong answer, but you know.
Totally. It's so funny. I grew up in Madrid, and one of my favorite snacks growing up was anchovies. I used to just eat it. I have this memory of as a kid eating it on the beach out of a tin, just like with my fingers.
Incredible. That's the dream. That is the dream.
I want to play a really quick game before we end, which is making a snack. I'm going to give you a little ingredient, and you can pair it with one ingredient to make a perfect snack. You ready? Okay, mango.
Salt or chili salt.
Okay, cheese.
A cracker.
Anchovies.
Salted butter.
Good one. Pickles.
Ham.
Ooh, okay. Melon.
Ham?
That's very Spanish of you.
I know.
Ice cream.
An ice cream cone.
Chips.
Caviar.
Okay, tahini.
It's so, you really got to make it into a sauce, I got to say. I feel like you got to like make it into a sauce and then you can serve it with stuff. But tahini on its own is tough. People like to put it with dates, but like I'm never doing tahini raw style. I got to turn it into something.
Okay, fair. Labneh.
Everything. A piece of celery. I don't care. I love it.
Just put it on anything. Yogurt.
A chicken wing?
Ooh, okay. We're going savory. Kimchi, which is my favorite food.
It's one of my favorite foods as well. Gotta say, one of the all-time best snacks is a kimchi and like very deeply aged cheddar, thin, crispy quesadilla. Like just a small amount of cheese, a small amount of kimchi, crispy corn tortilla. Very good food.
Well, that's really funny you say that.
That's two ingredients, but you know.
We'll make it count. I was gonna say, just to end on a little anecdote. My partner and I, so we started dating about 5 years ago, and the first thing she ever cooked for me was your kimchi cheddar omelet. And she didn't know kimchi was my favorite food, but it is my favorite food. I'd never thought to pair kimchi with cheddar, but here we go. And I wanted to thank you personally because 5 years later we're engaged, and
Gosh, congratulations.
we've cooked through every single one of your cookbooks, and starting with the kimchi omelet. So I wanted to just
Full
take the
circle.
opportunity. We've come full circle, and thank you. We're very grateful to you and your cooking, and I'm so excited for your cookbook. So thanks again for your time.
Of course. Oh my God, it was such a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you for having me.